Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Or as Robin Good used to say, good morning, Tucson. Or good afternoon, Tucson. I don't know, it's morning somewhere. Anyway, I do want to say thank you guys so much for showing up when you could have been any other place. This is our Lord, I'm working on it all the last 2 months. This is our people's priorities. This is our town hall, so we can get things that we're concerned about, some questions answered from some experts. And all I can tell you is we have over 40 years of expertise up here. So that is just granular in itself. This is being put on by the Arizona Commission of African American Affairs, African American Caucus of Tucson. And we're so happy to be able to do this. And I feel like this is our first, hopefully will not be the last, because we still got a long journey to go on this political environment. I want to talk about some housekeeping for those who are not familiar with the Dunbar. The bathroom facilities are right out this door with this exit sign. As you go out and you look up, you'll see the sign because the bathrooms are right to the right. Before I get into the program, I wanted to take a few minutes and introduce some distinguished guests. We got CD7 Democratic candidate Adelita Grijalva and Republican candidate Daniel Butierez. Jerry McPherson, Arizona Commission of African American Affairs. Arizona Representative Stephanie Stahl Hamilton, representing LD 21. Betty Villegas, representing LD 20. And Michelle Pima, LD 23. We also have Roy Tatum. He's the Senior Outreach Advisor under Senator Ruben Gallego. And we have Joe Delgado, former Commissioner of African American Affairs. And if I missed you, don't blame my heart, blame my brain. Yeah, let's do that. But don't blame my heart because I love everybody. Our timekeeper is Ms. Connie DeLarge, so that you can understand when the speaker has rounded up their 10 minutes, she's going to show the goals so they can know to start wrapping up. When she puts the red, they're going to then quiet, and then the next speaker will have their 10 minutes. Again, idea so that we can get to the Q&A section so that you guys can answer your question. As you're speaking, if you think of a question, I've got index cards out there. Use those index cards. Write that question because I don't want you to forget it. I also have sign-in sheets. Please write legibly so I can read it, particularly the email. Keep an eye on your spam because those questions that we do not have time to get answered, I'm collecting those cards, we're gonna get them answered, and I'm gonna send them out to you. Because this to me is so important. Our Social Security, unfortunately, had an issue. He was not able, but trust me, if you have a Social Security question, put it on one of those cards, and I will be sure you will get answered, and everyone's going to get that answer. I want to introduce the panel. And again, because we want to get to the Q&A as soon as possible, I'm not going to read a 30-minute dissertation. These guys have phenomenal credentials. They've done a lot for the community. They're tops in their fields. Otherwise, we wouldn't have it here. That's how we roll. Okay, Medicare, Brandy Jackson Starks, a licensed Medicare and life insurance professional. Housing, Jason Thorpe, Deputy Director of Housing, Pima County. Education, Dr. Tonya Strozier. Principal of Holladay Magnet School. Medicaid and Public Health Equity, Kenegos, retired RN, and a healthcare advocate. Without any further ado, I'm going to let Randy start.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me here. I'm honored to be able to share with you guys a little bit today about how what's being termed the Big Beautiful Bill affects Medicare, or if it does. There's a lot of misinformation out there, so hopefully I'll answer some of those questions. In a word, the answer is no, it does not. And that is in that there is no direct cuts to Medicare. There's nothing that is specifically designed to change the benefits that you're currently getting on Medicare. Those kind of changes come through what's called the final rule, and that's through the Center for Medicare Services. That was released in April of this year for next year already. The impact you're going to see on that are mostly positive impacts. You may have already seen some changes to your Part D, which is the drug plans. Those now have a cap of $2,000. There's no more donut hole, if you're familiar with that, where Medicare beneficiaries were required to pay up to 33% of the cost of their medications. So those are some of the major changes that happened this year that you'll see carry into next year. And so most of what you'll see from that is going to be positive. There's new Medicare payment plans that allow you to stretch your payments for your various drugs. And also prior authorization reforms that are going to be coming out as well. So those are some of the things. And I do have to be careful because of compliance and not say too much. But those are the kind of things that you'll see, and that comes from the Center for Medicare Services. If you also see any additional changes, it may be actuaries from different carriers who are going to be making changes to different benefits specifically for various carriers to offset some of the changes that we saw with like Medicare Part D and things like that. So you'll be getting an annual notice of change. If you are on Medicare, that happens right around September. I encourage you to pay attention to those. If you need help with reading those, find someone who can help you with that because there will be some changes. But again, those happen every year, nothing that is affected specifically through the Big Beautiful Bill, as it's called. But that does not mean that there is no impact. There is some indirect impact on Medicare, specifically because of the cuts that are part of the Big Beautiful Bill to Medicaid. So those things are actually going to have more of a trickle effect on Medicare. And that's what you're going to see. And because those particular populations are going to be affected, it will, over the years, affect Medicare availability, access to health care, cost of health care in general. So just to kind of go over what some of the changes were, there was an increased payment to physicians on the Big Beautiful Bill that includes a 2.5% increase for the Medicare physicians fee schedule that will start for 2026. But along with that came those, it was included in the larger package that allowed the cuts to Medicaid and stricter eligibility guidelines for Medicaid. And hopefully without stealing any thunder from Ken, that is some of the like work requirements or community involvement requirements, those kind of things that were part of that bill. Medicaid will also, people who are on Medicaid will see a reduction in coverages. And again, I'm not going to go too much into detail, but how that affects Medicare is if you are on Medicare and Medicaid, that allows you to be part of what's called a dual program. That dual program is where Medicare, as the federal government, is covering your medical expenses to the 80% that they do, and then the rest of the cost, co-pays, premiums, deductibles, those things are usually covered to some degree by Medicaid. And by Medicaid, and specifically referring for Arizona to Access. Also, there is an impact to rural hospitals because of the reduced funding for Medicaid, and a lot of those programs specifically affect rural areas where there's disproportionately a lot more people who are either on Medicaid or disability and require those services. These hospitals are already operating on a reduced budget, and so these cuts are detrimental to them. So some of them will be forced to close. Those closed hospitals will then force there to be less efficiencies in Medicare when it comes to the availability of good hospital care. So those are some of the things that we'll see over the long term, over about a decade. Also, there is a budget rule called PAYGO. PAYGO is a budget rule that requires any new legislation that increases the federal deficit to be offset by spending cuts and revenue increases. So what that means is that because there are going to be some increases that do affect the federal deficit, there will be cuts. And those cuts trigger automatic reductions in Medicare provider payments. So even though I started off talking about the increase of 2.5%, that's going to happen for various physicians, it's kind of going to be offset with some of the reductions to provider payments. And that's to the tune of almost $500 billion over the next decade. So those are some pretty significant cuts that that will affect Medicare. As a result of the providers not getting the same type of reimbursements, that may mean also that there is lack of some availability for doctors and hospitals that are willing to take Medicare programs. So we may see some kind of pinching in that area as well, where there aren't as many providers that are available that are willing to take some of the benefits that are inherent to Medicare. There's also a delayed benefits improvement. There was there was a provision before for expansions on low-income beneficiaries to for those programs to have some more improvements. So that's things like the Medicare savings programs, things that, again, help offset the cost of Medicare. That has been postponed based on the bill to October 1st of 2034. So we're not going to see those improvements that would have created some efficiencies. Changes to eligibility for non-citizens, that's probably one you've heard a lot about. Right now, the way that it works is that there is a work and age requirement for you to be on Medicare. That is, of course, the 65 years of age or having disability, end-stage renal kidney disease, or Lou Gehrig's disease. Those are the things that qualify you for Medicare. The work requirement is that you have to have been working in the United States for at least 10 years or 40 quarters, and be a United States citizen or a legal resident for at least 5 consecutive years. So that is something that was included in the Big Beautiful Bill. There are changes to that make it a lot more difficult for non-citizens, with the exception of some protected groups, which I believe is Haiti and Cuba, to be able to get Medicare under those eligibility requirements. And so in general, although Medicare isn't directly affected by the big beautiful bill, there are definitely some trickle-down effects that will happen that we do need to be aware of. The significant cuts will create inefficiencies. There are some negative consequences because of the cuts for beneficiaries who are on both Medicare and Medicaid. And so even though your benefits remain unchanged, which is a good thing, there are some long-term funding and eligibility shifts that may affect Medicare in general. So, and when we're talking about African American communities, also that is also has a huge impact on African American communities that do use these programs. So one of the things I definitely suggest is that we continue to look for and support legislation that is designed to help offset these various long-term effects that we will be seeing. And thank you for allowing me to share this information.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. I'm Jason Thorpe. I'm a Deputy Director with the City of Tucson Housing and Community Development Department. Our Director, Shineka, very much wanted to be here today, but is enjoying some much needed time away. So in terms of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, there's actually, similar to Medicare, very little direct impact to housing. There are two key provisions, which are both positive, although overall I would say that the act has very negative consequences for the people served through low-income housing programs. The two direct consequences are an expansion of the low-income housing tax credit. That's a program that provides important subsidy to permit affordable housing development across the country and is one of the key financial pieces that allows affordable housing development. And then the second is the permanent extension of opportunity zones, which provides tax incentives for investment in targeted low-income communities. So while there isn't a significant nexus directly to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, I do want to spend some time kind of grounding you in the housing reality that we're facing today, and then talking about what's happening locally to address our housing needs. So across the country, and especially here in Arizona, housing affordability has become a defining issue of our time. Over 50% of local residents are cost burdened, meaning that they spend 30% or more of their income on housing. Across our community, local shelter and supportive housing programs provide housing for more than 3,000 people every night, but still 1,300 people are sleeping on the streets. The City of Tucson hired Eco Northwest in 2024 to assess the number of additional units of housing that were necessary over the next 10 years to meet our community's needs. We found that that was 35,000 additional units of housing. Pima County then in 2025 conducted a similar assessment. In that assessment, they had similar results and also found that we needed 8,000 units specifically for people exiting homelessness. So to give you a concept of the gravity of the current issues. I want to talk a little also about the key challenges that we're facing. So just as our needs are growing as a community, some of the most critical tools in our toolbox are shrinking. Pandemic era federal funds are expiring, and there's very little resource to maintain long-term programs that have been very effective in recent years in addressing homelessness. Current federal budget proposals vary significantly. I did place a handout in the back that gives you 2025 enacted budget, so our current budget levels on various HUD programs, as well as what's been included in the Senate Appropriations Bill and the House Appropriations Bill. So we see very likely that there will be cuts to many programs. Okay, we're working. Also, the FY26 state budget zeroes out the state housing tax credit, which supplements the low-income housing tax credit program, as well as homeless shelter and services funding, which was a significant investment over the last few years to address homelessness across the state. Still, while there are challenges, there are bright spots happening. Our region has been very successful in securing competitive federal funds. I'm going to talk about a few successful endeavors, and in doing that, I want to acknowledge our partners at Pima County who have worked with us on many of those projects. First, in 2024, we received a PRICE grant, which was a new HUD program that invests in manufactured housing, particularly providing rehabilitation for housing units, helping manufactured housing residents to buy their parks and manage them as co-ops, as well as providing eviction prevention support for mobile home tenants. That program is in partnership with Pima County as well as several nonprofit organizations. Additionally, in partnership with Pima County, we applied for and received a pro-housing grant, another new HUD grant that will provide $7 million to provide incentives for affordable housing development and remove policy barriers to affordable housing development and preservation in Tucson and throughout Pima County. Then the city separately has received a $50 million grant to reinvest in the 85705 zip code. Some of the key activities there include a redevelopment of the Tucson house, which if you're unfamiliar, as you're driving down the I-10, it's the one very tall building that isn't downtown. So located at Main, Oracle, just north of Speedway, or I'm sorry, just south of Speedway. No, north, I apologize. That as well, in addition to that, it is community investments directly in local businesses, in nonprofit infrastructure, and then several affordable housing developments that I'll talk about in a moment. And then additionally, as I mentioned, the low-income housing tax credit program, which is one of those key drivers of affordable housing development. We've been very successful in securing low-income housing tax credit resources for some of the affordable housing developments that are currently underway locally. So as I mentioned locally, we're not sitting still despite these challenges. Under the direction of Mayor Regino Romero and City Council, we're working to tackle Tucson's housing challenges head-on. First, our Housing First program, which includes about $10 million in investment on an annual basis using local, state, and federal funds to provide street outreach programming to meet people in encampments and other outdoor areas and work with them to try to encourage them to come inside. Emergency shelter programs, a mobile shower program, housing navigation services to help people locate housing, and then about 200 units of supportive housing for people who have experienced long-term homelessness and have a disability. In addition to the Housing First program, we've begun engaging very directly in affordable housing. So for many years, the city has provided lending to nonprofit and for-profit developers to support affordable housing development. But we know that alone, that isn't meeting our community's needs. And so over the past few years, the city has begun developing affordable housing units directly. The first property that we developed and launched at the end of last year as Milagro on Oracle. That's at the site of the former No-Tell Motel, as well as 2 adjacent properties, if you're familiar with that area. And that's 63 units of affordable housing for older adults. We also have recently broken ground on Sugar Hill on Stone, which is located on Stone Avenue at the former Bumsteer site. That'll be 66 units of affordable housing for individuals and families with children. We also are about to open on September 1st, Amazon Flats, which provides 30 units of permanent supportive housing for people exiting homelessness. And then there will be a second phase under development in the next few years on an adjacent property that it will allow an additional 50 units of permanent supportive housing. And then the largest project that we're currently working on and is in pre-development is a major development at the intersection of 10th Avenue and 22nd Street. It's at the location of the former transfer site and will include 300 to 400 units of mixed income housing. So a very large development that we're really excited to be moving forward. So in addition to development, we actively manage about 7,000 units of housing across the community. That includes 450 units of affordable housing through our El Portal program, about 1,500 units of housing that are public housing, so federally subsidized for low-income individuals, particularly serving older adults, people exiting homelessness, people with disabilities, and low-income families with children. In addition to public housing, we manage the Housing Choice Voucher Program, or what people commonly know as Section 8, through which we provide subsidies for approximately 5,500 families across the community that are in community rentals. And then additionally, we provide down payment assistance, again in partnership with Pima County, to help low-income home buyers buy their first or subsequent homes, as well as operating a number of home repair programs through which we help low-income homeowners to stay in their homes by providing necessary home repairs. So while there is a lot happening and it's very positive, I want to be very clear that despite all these efforts, we cannot solve the problem locally. The city cannot solve this problem. The county cannot solve this problem alone without strong federal partnership. Right now, we're not seeing the level of federal investment needed to match the scale of the housing crisis. In most areas, we're hoping for flat funding or modest increases at best. But in several key programs, we're anticipating cuts. As you see in the handout that I provided, several key programs are at risk, including our Public Housing Fund, the Community Development Block Grant, which supports critical community investments in nonprofit services, and the Home Investment Partnerships Program, which provides important resources to support affordable housing development and preservation. On that handout, you'll also see one additional piece of legislation that I think is very worth watching, and I would encourage you to contact members of Congress in support of the Road to Housing Act. This is a bipartisan bill that will expand and preserve housing supply, improve affordability, and implement new oversight measures on HUD programs. And so while the bill is imperfect, absolutely, it provides very important resources and drivers to support policy and funding for affordable housing preservation and development. So those are some of the key activities. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to be here today and look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tonya Strozier, and I'm currently the Director of TUSD's African American Student Services. I'm also a commissioner with the Arizona Commission of African American Affairs. So today I stand before you as an educator, as a mother, a minister, and a woman who actually didn't learn to read until the 4th grade. And so I know what it means, and I know what it feels like to be overlooked by the system that was supposed to serve you and educate you. But I also know the power of transformation that we can have if we choose to reclaim this education space. The things that we're seeing in education right now, in my opinion, are very intentional. And the education system that many of us experienced, I'm telling you, is going away. And there are intentional acts to defund this education system, this public education system. A part of the big, beautiful bill was a little part in there with a few $100 million in it that was intended to create a federal voucher system. And if you don't know what that means that it will fund options that are outside of the regular school system that we see. Now, I know that can be pretty startling for some people, but we have to realize that the promise that you and I experienced is being erased intentionally. And so if you think about why the U.S. Department of Education was even created, it was created because we needed a watchdog. We needed an avenue to protect our rights for students that have special needs, for students that look like us. We needed that federal oversight. And if you don't know already, what has happened is there's a dismantling of the U.S. Department of Education. And so that means if you look like me, if you have students with special needs, you should be afraid. Whether that's your nieces or your nephews or your grandchildren, you should be very concerned. And so part of that dismantling would mean that it could look like the federal funds that we generally use or receive from the federal government become block grants. But some of the problems that exist with block grants means that there's less oversight, and we may not have those things that we assume that we could utilize to protect us. They won't be there. There's also, if you haven't heard that in the news recently, that there were millions and millions of dollars that were being withheld from Arizona, and that affected professional development. There was migrant funds in there, after school, the 21st century funds in there, and they were holding those dollars, and they just released them this week. Do you know the domino effect of scaring schools in that way that they couldn't even plan who were going to have after school programs? I personally know colleagues who didn't know that they were going to be able to do their job because that money was being withheld. And yes, we're happy that the funds were released, but those funds are going to end in 27. So when I tell you that this public school system is being dismantled, it is literally being dismantled. Now, as much as we may feel different ways about the ESAs, and I know for some people that's a curse word, but ESA vouchers, we're not even taking advantage of them. Our community is actually not even the ones primarily using them. But what is happening is those dollars are going into private religious organizations that, yeah, we don't think that that's fair because there are dollars. And in my opinion, we have to have people that look like us that will remain in that public school system to fight for it to stay alive. But some of us are going to have to get out ahead. We're going to have to think about how do we develop community, develop opportunities for us to make sure that our students are continue to be well educated. And having been an educator and a turnaround principal and been on the inside, I do believe in public education, but I can also say it really is not perfect. And I've been at the front row and seen the actual harm in the system that we're trying to maintain. So we've got to be realistic about the actual public school system and what our kids are experiencing. And we have to understand that every act that is happening in relation to education is intended to break it. It is intended to break it. Now, either we can stay here and try and prop it up, or some of us need to get out ahead and start building a system for these Black and brown students to come to. That is going to happen. What I'm saying is that we have to be bold enough to choose. We have to be bold enough to choose our kids and give them the education that they deserve. It's an emergency. This is an absolute state of emergency. Now, as vouchers continue to flourish, whether you like them or not, there is and there are repercussions to the public school system we are sitting in. What happens when teachers flee? Classroom sizes go up. What happens when we get bullied and they hold our federal money? There's a trickle-down effect. People become afraid. And so we have to think creatively. We have to be ready to pivot. And I think that's something that our community desperately needs to work on. Is we can't wait for it to crumble and cry while it's crumbling. We've got to build our own system. And as a matter of fact, that's not even a new concept for our community. Do you guys remember the Freeman schools? Do you remember that? The Rosenbad schools? We had our own schools. Does anybody remember that? So we're not just now valuing education. We did this before they even allowed us in. We made a way to learn. You remember how we used to have those, what do they call them, those literature circles? We had those. So we don't need to invent too many new things. We need to remember where we came from. So before there was a decrease in the number of African-American educators, we led education. We had master's degrees. We had doctoral degrees. We had it. Now, people can feel however they want to feel about Brown versus the Board of Education, but one of the consequences was the mass or the forced exit of African-American educators. And we have yet to recover. So we need to think a little bit differently. We need to think retrospectively and how we're going to use that to push ourselves forward. And then lastly, I want to make this plea. We have got to embrace the AI revolution. Our community cannot wait to embrace it. If we wait, we are being left behind. It just came out this week that our administration is positioning the United States as the #1 leader in AI. We're already behind. China is already there. Did you guys know that? Yeah. They have already backwards designed so that their kids in their primary system are already learning about AI. No one in this city is doing that. So if you don't know AI, you got a problem. If your grandchildren don't know AI, they've got a problem. So in order for us to position ourselves, not always coming from behind, but ahead, we have got to think about what is happening right now. Millions of dollars are about to come down around AI. Did you know that? And if our kids are not at the table and we are not at the table to get a slice of that pie, we will be left behind. AI is the future, whether you want it or not. And if your kids and your grandchildren and your great-grand, they don't know it, they're going to be left behind. It's already shaping our future in every single industry. If they don't realize that they can go into Gamma.app and make a PowerPoint in 2 minutes, did you know that? I can name 20 different apps that if you don't have it, you are already behind in your level of productivity, no matter what field you are in. So what we need to be thinking about is how do we create those type of think tanks? How do we create those type of platforms that we can get our kids armed with AI today, not yesterday, today. So I just want to thank you again. I know I sound real aggressive, but I am passionate. I'm very passionate about, not leaving our kids behind. We can't wait. And if we are waiting for someone else to solve our problems, that's already a problem. That's a problem in itself. So I will be around because I've got some ideas. And if you're ready to contribute and you're ready to work to make sure that our kids are positioned ahead, come and find me. I'm gonna find
you. Oh, he says me. My name is Kenegos. I'm a retired registered nurse, and I'm the coordinator of the Arizona Medicare for All Coalition, which which is a project of Progressive Democrats of America, Arizona. I was asked to talk about the effects of the big ugly bill on access, which is Medicaid in Arizona. There are estimates up to 750,000 people being affected. This bill is going to change healthcare in general, not just Medicare. You don't have a Medicaid. If you don't have Medicaid, that doesn't mean that you won't be affected. The bill enables the Trump regime to make our dysfunctional healthcare system even worse. We already have the worst health outcomes of any wealthy country. We have 85 million people who are uninsured or underinsured. US healthcare costs twice as much as those other countries spend, and they don't leave anybody out. Our healthcare is designed to make profits for billionaires, just like the big ugly bill. The reaction of insurers and healthcare providers to the big ugly bill will impact all of us. Seldom discussed is that as insurers release their proposed rates for 2026, enrollees could see their premiums increase by as much as 75%. Here's a rundown, somewhat in chronological order, of things triggered by the big ugly bill. There will be immediate changes to the Medicare savings program, which was mentioned earlier, where people qualify for Medicare and Medicaid, and the Medicaid covers most of their out-of-pocket expenses. But currently, 31 states will apply for anyone who has received SSI payments to be on that program. The bill prohibits states from automatically applying for those people. So it's just placing barriers to a good program that exists to give people more complete coverage. If you apply and begin receiving the SSI because you're over 65 and have a low income, you should apply for the Medicare savings program. But if you don't know about it, you won't apply for it. Although 31 states automatically do it, they can't do it anymore. The bill will immediately cut Medicaid payments for hospitals and nursing facilities. The bill prohibits states from instituting new payment levels to these facilities. The bill requires a 10% decrease in payments currently in place until January 2028. Without additional legislation, this is going to reduce hospital revenues and almost certainly will affect access to hospitals and nursing facilities. It's estimated that there are over 300 hospitals in the country that will be closing. Also, immediately, Medicaid reimbursement for services such as cancer screenings and birth control provided by Planned Parenthood and related organizations have been stopped. Beginning in September of this year, there will be a $50 billion in grants available to states for payments to rural hospitals. A tenth of what Senator Susan Collins, a Republican, tried to get. We got a tenth of it. So that's just 5% of the $1 trillion in funding that the law cuts. In Arizona, hospitals in Nogales, Bisbee, Glow, Winslow, and Page are already considered in danger of closing. On January 1st, 2026, there will be a 75% increase in out-of-pocket premium payments each month for the average ACA or Obamacare enrollee due to a cut of the government funds that are now available to reduce premiums. That's part of the bill. For example, a family of 3 earning $110,000 and enrolled in an ACA Silver plan in 2025 pays $779 in premiums. Their expected premium notice for 2026 will be an increase of $883. Of course, many people won't be able to afford that, and they will be added to the uninsured. Beginning October 1st, 2026, lawfully present immigrants, including refugees, individuals granted asylum, and certain survivors of domestic violence or trafficking, will no longer be eligible for Medicaid. Then there's the deceptive proposition that our tax dollars are paying for Medicaid coverage of the undocumented. In Arizona, undocumented people can only receive care under Medicaid if they're hospitalized for a serious condition. In that case, it's the hospital that applies for the Medicaid so that the hospital can be paid. In that case, the alternative to doing that is, one, you don't give people care at all and you let them die, or you make it worse for the hospitals and more of them go bankrupt. And we all know that we're all healthier when all of our neighbors have access to care. Beginning in December 31st, 2026, after the midterm elections, Medicaid eligibility redeterminations, including work requirements, will be at least every 6 months, rather than once a year if you are between 19 and 64 years old. Work requirements cost more to administer than any savings their cruelty might realize. 94% of Medicaid recipients are already either working or have medical conditions or need to care for dependents that prevent them from working. This means that if you're applying for or on Medicaid, you are required to work or participate in qualifying activities for at least 80 hours per month and report those activities through your state. If your Medicaid application is denied or you are disenrolled for not meeting the work requirements, you're also prohibited from purchasing subsidized health plans on the marketplace. Parents with children under the age of 13 and those who are medically frail are exempt. Medicaid eligibility redetermination letters, if it doesn't get to you, you're disenrolled. You may try to call the Medicaid office, but the wait times are going to be even longer than they already have been. Paperwork errors or omissions will result in losing access to health care. Of course, that is the point of work requirements. Because of the PAYGO law, which was previously mentioned, requiring automatic cuts to federal funding from Medicare and other programs, when the national debt increases as it does by $3.4 trillion under the big ugly bill. Federal funding for Medicare will be cut $490 billion between 27 and 34, which will result in decreased payments to medical providers. This likely will lead to fewer providers accepting Medicare and more hospital closures, especially in rural areas. Your physician might not be able to financially continue treating patients on Medicare. The staggered implementation of these health cuts and targeting of Medicaid and Medicare may make it seem like a lot of small changes that won't affect you, but they will. Regardless of the type of coverage you have, emergency rooms are going to be more crowded. That could prevent the type of rapid care that is needed in a true emergency. The amount of uncompensated care at those hospitals will go up, and states likely will be denying care and causing more obstacles. So we know what happens when people don't have access to health care. Our broken healthcare system before these cuts produced 68,000 unnecessary deaths every year. A recent study says that the proposed cuts will add another 51,000 deaths a year. We can't settle for going back to our system before the big ugly bill. That system divides us according to how much we can pay. What we really need is a nonprofit public health care system that covers everyone. Single payer, improved and expanded Medicare for all. Everybody in, nobody out. Thank you. Please read our prior with me. Back to you.
Thank you guys so much for all that great information. And trust me, you guys, I was over there taking me some notes fast. Thank goodness my shorthand, thank you, came in handy. I did that back in high school. It's been a long time. But anyway, we're now to our Q&A, and this is really important. I'm gonna make one other announcement. There is food, there's refreshments. Please participate. We don't want to have to take this food home. There's sweets and everything. Got a sweet tooth? Go ahead, get back there. The next thing is your questions. I've got a couple of questions, so if you've got more questions, I've got our VP, Mr. Hale, collecting them. Your questions should really be around these four topics. The four topics: Medicare, housing, education, or Medicaid. When you're dealing with political, because this is not a political environment, we're not here about the red or the blue, the green, the yellow, or whatever it is. We're here to talk about these four topics because they're going to impact us as a community, not only here, but across our nation. So if you got relatives other places, educate them. Tell them to look, get out there and look some of this stuff up, or get to their representatives, whatever it is they got to get educated. Thank you so much. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure. If rural hospitals are being cut in funds, what is the offset to this? What are the benefits?
Well, I don't see any benefit to cutting rural hospitals' funds. Not only do Medicaid recipients not be able to go to the rural hospitals where they live, nobody gets to go to those hospitals, and those hospitals are often one of the biggest employers in those communities. So you've got all this job loss, and it's a disaster. We need more medical facilities, not less.
In addition to that, the inefficiencies that it's going to create with other hospitals that are then forced to try and to compensate for these facilities no longer being available will impact more than just the rural communities as well.
Okay. Now, this I thought was a really good one. Aside from hoping for more grants from federal sources, how can we make a positive impact on the homelessness crisis?
Thank you, that's a great question. So I do think there are a few things that are happening. And so one is that we know right now philanthropy is stepping up in the homeless space. The United Way recently adopted housing and homelessness as a key priority strategy. Many local foundations are beginning to try to fill the gaps of some of the federal awards. Mayor and council at the city of Tucson have also invested additional local tax resources in doing so. And then I want to elevate what I think is one of the most important local things that's happening in the housing space right now. And that's, you may have followed the Pima County Board of Supervisors recently enacted a minor property tax increase that will result in significant revenue over the next 10 years. That revenue is specifically targeted at addressing homelessness as well as spurring affordable housing development. And so one of the things that I think is super important is to understand, we often think about homelessness and affordable housing as being separate issues. The reality is a lack of affordable housing and an increased pressure as there's inward migration into the city of Tucson is creating more and more pressure and rising rental costs for existing market-based housing as well as affordable housing that is pushing people into homelessness. And so as we think about strategies, one of the most important things is not just how do we help people who are living in homelessness today, but how do we interrupt that pipeline up front to prevent low-income families from falling into homelessness? The doors into homelessness are much wider than the doors out. And so that's one of the key pieces that we're looking at as a community is how do we continue to invest significantly in homelessness prevention as a tool?
Okay, great. Thank you so much. This is for Medicare. Brandy, you mentioned there was negative impacts due to that not as many providers being willing to accept this coverage. What are, see, in addition, healthcare providers are businesses and they may choose to not participate with anyone. In other words, your conclusion does not reflect the big beautiful bill. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that was a little bit, so I will say that the changes, did you have a question? Do you want to make a comment?
I wrote that question. It wasn't read completely, but
Okay.
I can reread it for you if you like.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, sorry, my handwriting is not as great. Never has been. You mentioned negative impacts due to not as many providers being willing to accept this coverage.
Yes.
This sounds to me more like an assumption, considering you did not provide any data to us that would suggest otherwise. In addition, healthcare providers are a business. They're businesses, and they may choose not to do business with anyone as they see fit. With this in mind, the red flag raised by your analysis is true with any Medicare plan, not just the big beautiful bill, right? In other words, your conclusion does not reflect a direct result of the big beautiful bill. And I'm just wondering.
So the first thing about that is that what we're talking about are trickle effects of what may happen as a result. So what we're being told is that Medicare is not being affected at all. And I think that's the misnomer here, because there are impacts that will eventually affect and will affect over time the Medicare program itself. So when it comes to providers, providers, of course, can choose to accept or not accept marriage plans, and that's with or without the bill. But with a lot of the changes that have occurred to Medicaid as a result of the bill, it's going to probably, what the data is showing, or what the research is showing, is that it's going to encourage or probably have more people that will or more providers that will be less likely to want to participate in these programs because of the cost and the compensations that they're going to be getting. So that is where that information comes from, and that's how it's again, it's kind of like the domino effect is what I was referring to on Medicare itself.
Okay. With the increase in the rate of students graduating high school not able to read at grade level, how can you justify keeping the same broken system? As a parent, I want to have the money to move my student where she can succeed. The ESA voucher can help me with that.
I don't know what you want me to say. Yes. Yes, you can. The problem that I was pointing out, not even necessarily the problem, but really the opportunity, is that there are many families that look like me that are not using them. And so there does need to be more work where we explain that these options are available. You can, and if you take, for example, South Point in this city, has an incredibly high tuition. The ESA voucher can only cover between $7,000 and $9,000, depending on the needs of your student. Should you have the right to take that money with you? Well, that's what the ESA says. There is language that says that parents are empowered to do that. My challenge is that there are many low-income families that look like me that don't utilize the ESA. And so does work need to be done where we can explain to our parents that that's an option? I'm saying yes.
I had a question here that someone had asked about, I guess the new executive order about the homeless, removing their encampments into government lands. What do you have to say about that?
It's deeply disturbing. So an executive order was released on July 24th that reverts several existing strategies to address homelessness. And I want to be the first to say, so our approach to ending homelessness as a nation is not fully effective today. With that, there is absolutely opportunity to improve. The executive order suggests that we should be sweeping encampments and forcing people into treatment and into institutions. This is a reversion to a very old strategy that is absolutely in violation of people's civil liberties and also has proven to be ineffective.
Okay.
A follow-up on that? Does housing first work in your mind?
I believe housing first, when implemented with fidelity, works. What most people are referring to as housing first and what the federal government has implemented as housing first is not true housing first. Housing first is an evidence-based practice that puts people that are experiencing chronic homelessness, so long-term homelessness paired with a disability, in housing before requiring treatment or other services, makes those services voluntary, and uses high-touch active engagement and community involvement. That is not what's happening in many homeless service programs across the country, largely because of underinvestment in those programs.
I just want to say something, but I think that if we house homeless people first without treatment, we're not helping them because they're going to keep doing what they've been doing. So they need treatment first in order to learn how to take care of the home as well. So I think it should be the reverse. I'm just saying that because I did visit the homeless shelter this week, and that is their philosophy, is to get them the mental health services first before actually giving them that home where they're going to take care of and flourish and get their job and be a better citizen.
Thank you for elevating that approach. I think one of the important things, and one of the reasons that often treatment first approaches aren't used is not because they aren't the ideal scenario that someone would go through treatment first, but that we know that people often don't. And so bringing people into housing has proven to be more effective just in the way of engaging people who have experienced long-term homelessness and have had some of the most challenging consequences. With that said, housing first is not designed to be housing only. Treatment is a key component of housing first. It just recognizes the individual dignity of each person to be able to make that decision about how they will engage in services and what services they will engage in.
Okay, How is City of Tucson Housing ensuring the most vulnerable are aware and have access to the new housing developments you described?
Absolutely. So several of the new developments are considered replacement housing for the Tucson house. So as I mentioned, we're doing a full redevelopment of that 17-story property. Because all of those folks will need to relocate to allow for that development. The first priority is in moving folks who are in existing public housing properties that otherwise would have no housing. Second, many of those housing developments have preferences for people exiting homelessness, some of the most vulnerable in our community. And as I mentioned, the Amazon Flats in particular, which between the two phases will provide 80 units of permanent supportive housing for people with disabilities who are experiencing homelessness. In addition to that, there is in many of these developments a sort of tiered approach to income basis. And so that anyone who is accessing these affordable housing developments has to have a very low income. And so we know that high poverty experiences are negatively impactful for families, particularly for children. The young people growing up in low-income neighborhoods in substandard housing have lower educational outcomes, have lower long-term employment trajectories. And so those are some of the key ways. There's also, we're also exploring an important effort for what we're considering a right to return. And this is an approach that's been used in other communities across the country and that we're looking to implement. It says if you have existing ties to a community but have been displaced by gentrification, that you have a preference in these projects to be able to return. And so one of the places where we're looking at doing that first is the Sugar Hill on Stone property, again located at the former Bumsteer site. And so we recognize that many African American folks in particular, but community members of the former Sugar Hill area and now Dunbar Springs, have been displaced due to rising rental and housing costs. And so recognizing that people have a right to return to their communities of origin and being able to support that through development efforts.
Great, thank you. This is going to be the last question because we need to get on with our candidacy from the CD7 for their conversation. So for Ken, how would we start to make a Medicare for all system? Do you have any idea?
Of course. The reason it has the name Medicare for All, we now have a Medicare system that was originally implemented before computers, before any of that, across everyone over 65 in a very short period of time, less than a year it was implemented. What we need to do is plug the holes in the Medicare system, such as dental, vision, hearing, that are not covered, and a few other things, and then expand Medicare coverage to everyone from birth all the way. And one of the big problems, the usual question is, how are you going to pay for it? The thing is that we're paying double right now. Is that all our money is going into profit. Profit is what determines what care happens. Insurance companies deny care because they make more money that way. It's not that hard to do from where we are.
So can you please help me thank our panelists for their time today? Now we're going to have a switch so that we can have our candidates come up. Thank you so much for coming out, because again, you could have been anywhere else, but you decided to be here with us. And again, I have some cards here that did not get answered. Some of them were very involved, and it was going to take a minute to decipher a little bit. If you have more cards, more questions, please leave them on the table, and I'm going to collect those and making sure you guys get answers, because that is still dear and very important. So Mr. Jerry McPherson.
Good afternoon. afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be before you today and bring this very important program to you all. Just have to thank once more Algeria and Connie for definitely coordinating and leading this event and this engagement. I am pleasantly surprised with the turnout. If the scrambling to find tables and more chairs was any indication, we most certainly caught by surprise by this wonderful turnout. But without any further ado, I know you all did not register and take the trip down to the Dunbar to see me, but Joe may have. I am just a bonus to today's activities. My name is Jerry McPherson, and I have the privilege of serving as Executive Director for the Arizona Commission of African American Affairs. And actually, our commission went through a name change with recent legislation passage. Going forward, we'll be known as the Governor's Office of African American Affairs. So thank you, Governor Hobbs, if there's any indication of what Governor Hobbs feels the importance for our commission or now office, I think the name change is reflective of that. Housekeeping from, I guess, my perspective. If you are on social media, you can find us at Arizona CAAA across all social media platforms, Facebook, which we are currently streaming on, YouTube, which we are currently streaming on, Instagram, which we are currently streaming on. But across social media platforms, if you search Arizona CAAA, all one word, you'll be able to get connected with us. Our office, our commission is only as important as a relationship that we have with our constituents. I need to know what's important. I need to know what issues are most prominent in your lives, and I need to be as informed as I can to be of best service to you. When I speak with our governor, when I speak with our state legislature, when I speak with our state agencies, to keep them informed of what are the needs of our community members. Without any further ado, I would like to start the next phase of the program by introducing our guests. Please, Supervisor Adelita Grijalva and Dan Butierez, please make your way to the stage. As they are making their way to the stage, I will begin by reading each of their bios and then give each of our candidates an opportunity to introduce themselves, say brief words, and then we'll get into the Q&A portion of our program. We have some prepared questions that the candidates were provided just a few days ago, to be clear and transparent, but we will be accepting questions from the audience. We will use the same process of filling out cards on your table. A member of the team will collect that card and bring it up to have the questions answered by our candidates. First of which, we have Dan Butierez is a proud, lifelong Arizonan whose family has lived in the state for over 100 years. Born in Tucson in 1966, Dan comes from a long line of Arizonans. His father was born in Pima, his grandfather in Solomon. His deep roots reflect a lifetime of connection to the people and land of Arizona. Dan is a small business owner, not a career politician. Through his businesses, he focuses on second chances, hiring people, overcoming addiction, or reentering society after incarceration. In one recent summer alone, his companies employed 63 individuals, many from halfway houses fighting to recover from fentanyl addiction. Dan and his wife live in Marana, where they rescue animals, 25 horses and nearly 70 dogs so far, believing every life matters. Dan's life was shaped by an extraordinary injustice. He was wrongfully convicted and spent 10 years incarcerated without a fair trial. For 30 years, he fought to clear his name, and in 2019, the state of Arizona formally acknowledged the mistake. The experience cost him dearly, his family, career, and freedom, but he never gave up. He found strength and faith and rebuilt his life, dedicating himself to helping others do the same. Today, Dan advocates for veterans, small business owners, and people in recovery, those too often left behind. With great compassion and firsthand experience, Dan Butierez stands ready to serve Arizona while lifting up others and protecting the values that built his family and his future. Please welcome Dan. Next, we have Adelita Grijalva, is a lifelong public servant, advocate, and resident of Southern Arizona. A graduate of Pueblo High School and the University of Arizona. She began her 25-year career working at Pima County Teen Court, helping court-involved youth through a restorative juvenile diversion program. Adelita was first elected to public office in 2002, serving on the Tucson Unified School District Governing Board, where she championed the expansion of preschool access and defended Mexican-American studies. In 2020, Adelita was elected to the Pima County Board of Supervisors, representing District 5. She became the first Latina and only second woman to serve as chair and was reelected in 2024 with over 73% of the vote. As a supervisor, she prioritized affordable housing, climate resiliency, and community wellness, launching the county's first free school program for low-income families and protecting open spaces in the Sonoran Desert for future generations to enjoy. A believer in public-private partnerships, Adelita serves on multiple community boards. She lives in Tucson with her husband and 3 children and is the proud daughter of the Honorable Congressman Raul M. Grijalva. Please welcome Adelita. Now I would like to open the program by giving the candidates an opportunity to give a welcome introduction. We'll ask that we confine it to roughly 2 minutes, and we will start with Supervisor Grijalva.
Thank you. Buenas tardes. Thank you all for being here. This is the first opportunity that we have to have a debate in this election. The previous ones were forums. It's a little bit different kind of configuration. What I think is really important is being open-minded enough and respectful enough to listen to all opinions that are being shared. We are walking into this race with very different opinions on what are important priorities in our community and in our nation. And, or maybe the priorities might be the same, but how we get there are very different. So I hope that we are going to have a really good dialogue, because I think that you'll see that there are many differences in both of the candidates that are here, and that both of us are here because we want people to listen to what our platforms are and listen to why it is that we're running. So we have very different opinions on how we get there, and I'll talk a little bit about my history. I am the proud granddaughter of a bracero, a very hard-working Mexican immigrant who came to this country with the promise of work and a better opportunity for a future. And my dad, and I'm the proud daughter of a US congressman. That happened in one generation because of public education and a lot of hard work. And so I am an incredible advocate for public education and for making sure that people who don't have a voice have one. I think it's important that we provide justice, equity, and dignity for our most vulnerable communities. And that is why I am running. My daughter just graduated from high school, from Pueblo High School, my alma mater. I know, there you are, Starks, I see you. And, you know, I stood up there on the stage handing out diplomas and realized that the future for this generation coming up is very different than the one that I walked into when I graduated. And I want to make sure that every person in our community has the right to reach their own American dream and has those doors of opportunity opened and not slammed shut by a lot of short-sighted cuts to our communities. I, as one person who have lived here my entire life, am very sick of our communities being scapegoated and being marginalized and being overlooked. So that's why I am running. Thank you for being here.
Hello, I'm Daniel Butierez. I was born and raised here in Tucson. And Mrs. Grijalva is absolutely correct. There are some things that we absolutely agree on, but we have a totally different way of reaching the final thing, because without a doubt, we were both born here. We obviously both care about our community. I just have a different way of I want to get it. As a matter of fact, my big passion is helping the homeless. And we heard talk earlier, and I actually wanted to stand up and say something, but I figured I probably should. Let everyone else say it, talk, but I actually work at helping the homeless, and I have been doing that for years with my company. And as a matter of fact, today, as you said in my bio, hired 67 one summer. We just hired 16 today. They just started today on the college terms. That's where my passion lies, in doing something. And like Mrs. Grijalva said, I have a different path to get there. And I've actually overcome that, because I have been homeless. I have done drugs. I have overcome many obstacles in my life to get to where I am today. And today I'm a business owner that can help our community get off the street. That's what I address. But there will be many different things that we don't agree on, and some things that we will. And, but my biggest thing is addressing the homeless. And that's good enough for me.
Thank you both. We will now transition into the question and answer portion of our program. There will be opportunity for questions towards the end. So if you have a question or would like to offer a rebuttal to anything that may not rebuttal, follow up to anything that has been asked, please write it down and get it over to us. We would want to incorporate and make you a part of this program as well. And we'll start with healthcare access and affordability, one of the topics that we covered earlier today. So Arizona has one of the highest uninsured rates in the country. Many CD7 residents, especially rural, tribal, and low-income areas, struggle to access affordable, quality care. What is your plan to expand healthcare access and address disparities across Southern Arizona? We'll start with Supervisor Grijalva.
Thank you. I think universal affordable coverage through Medicare for all is really important. I feel like that is something that we have to do. We have to lower prescription drug prices. We have to reduce the deductible premiums and all of our out-of-pocket expenses. The thing that I think people are missing here is when you provide opportunities for people to go and get those well baby checks, to have maintenance, to let's check it out on an annual basis. You can find things that are preventable diseases. You can do early intervention for cancers and other things that really negatively impact the quality of life for people. And it impacts the families as well. And so I think when we do that, we ensure that if we have Medicaid for all and the process actually makes sense, and we refine some of the things that I know are not perfect in the system, that we have the opportunity to keep these rural hospitals open. You know, the list of hospitals that were set here, 4 of those are in CD7. That's going to negatively impact the quality of life of people in this community. And as a mom of 3, having healthcare was incredibly important. I could take my baby to those well baby checks and make sure everything was okay, talk to a doctor about the things that are important. And it's those programs for new moms, for people that are supporting family members through healthcare crises. Those are the programs that are getting cut right now. That is what's going to negatively impact our community. And 376,000 Arizonans could be kicked off of Medicaid. And of that number, 142,000 are children. Those are babies. And I don't know why that is something that anyone would want in any community. I think healthcare should be universal, and it should be something that is nonpartisan. Because when people are in medical debt, that is a devastation for families and generations. Thank you.
I absolutely believe everyone should have health care, and we need to fix our healthcare system. It is clearly broken, but to do that, we need to address the fraud that's happening. We have a lot of issues with people. I'll give you an example. We have people that are homeless in homeless camps that take cabs to go get their methadone. All that's paid for with access. I know this for a fact because my sister's one of them. She's been on methadone for decades. Her husband's been on methadone for decades. This methadone is something that us taxpayers pay for all these people. We also pay for their taxi cab drives to get there. All that's paid for by Medicaid. These are things that we need to address. Individuals that are getting health care. I'll give you another example of how easily fraud is committed. As y'all know, I own 2 small businesses. I could easily tell one of my employees that wanted to get access and he made too much money to get access. Tell you what, I'll give you a pay cut, you go down and get access and I'll pay you cash. I mean, these are frauds that can be committed at any time, and we need to find these frauds, eliminate these frauds, and then see where our money can go, how we can make it go further. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to follow up to say that a lot of the programs that we're talking about that can actually do real preventative work, can really do strong intervention work, those programs are getting cut by the federal cuts. And I think that when we're talking about how to address issues with substance abuse, so much of that is prevention. And then when you have intervention and early intervention, you have to have support systems there. I mean, statistically, it's so much better to be in an inpatient treatment than it is to be outpatient. But we don't have the capacity to do that in any community. And what's going to be worse is the people that are in those programs that are getting those supports day to day are not going to have that opportunity anymore when these cuts actually are implemented. That's the scarier part. If we're concerned about what it looks like now, let's check in coincidentally after the midterms, and then we're going to see what the negative impacts are. That also was not a coincidence. To have a lot of the cuts that are going to be implemented after people are voted in on the midterms, then we're going to see the devastation. That's going to be really hard for our communities.
We'll move to the next question and we'll start with Dan Butierez on this question. Arizona public schools, especially CD7, are underfunded and overstretched. Now with the U.S. Department of Education withholding federal funds due to concerns about Arizona's universal voucher program, how would you ensure that public school students in underserved communities aren't punished or left behind as the state navigates this conflict?
Well, I agreed with the young lady that was talking earlier. Mothers, parents need to be educated on the fact that they can use the school voucher programs. Everyone should have an opportunity to use the school voucher program. My grandchildren actually live in Sarita, and they go to school in Vail, which their mother drives them every day because it's a better school. We need to improve all our schools so that all our schools are better schools, so that our children don't have to travel all the way across the state. That is an issue we have with our schools. And I can tell you this, the schools, what they're teaching in our schools today are not what they were teaching in our schools when I was there. We need to get back to the basics and start educating our children. Thank you.
So this is an issue that I think we're going to disagree on how to get there. The cuts of the Department of Education, Arizona receives $1 billion for K-12 programs that are Title I, Title IX, Title X. Those are really critical programs for our students. Those are the programs that are being held with the threat that it's going to be gone. And I think it's really interesting when people talk about going back to the basics and what we learned when we were in school. I graduated in 1989. What we were learning then was how to type. Like literally, I had to type. I mean, that's not something that I want to go back to. What we had in our schools were like chalkboards. They were beautiful, sure, and now they're like historic. But our students we need to equip them with the tools that they need now for the future. And when we're not supporting our teachers the way we should. We have teachers that have 2 or 3 jobs because they cannot afford to just teach. That's a travesty in our system. Public education should be a nonpartisan issue. Public education should be what we all know it to be for those of us that went through the programs. That opens the doors of opportunity and changes the families for generations. No one can take away your education. And so when we continue to push these vouchers, The people that are capitalizing on those vouchers are the people that make the most money in our communities. They take that backpack funding and take it to private schools. They fill the gap. Let's be respectful. Let's be respectful, okay? Thank you so much. And I think, look, I'm totally comfortable being here and debating. I think that it's healthy and fine, but I'm not gonna sit here and get screamed at and not say anything. That's not happening, okay? It's not happening. Because I'm not gonna deal with that. Everyone here should be respectful to both of us, and I'm not gonna tolerate being screamed and yelled at. That's just not gonna happen. As I was saying, when you look at just, let's say South Point, the voucher does not cover the tuition. That is a fact. So families are gonna have to come out of pocket, right? And when our voucher program pays more per pupil funding than it does to our public school systems, that's a problem. And when our private schools do not have a line item at all for special education, for occupational therapy and speech therapy, that is a problem. Where do you think those babies go? They are pushed out of those private systems and back into our public schools, which is why a school district like Tucson Unified has 30% of our children are in an individualized education plan. Statistically in the community, it's 7%. Does anyone see a correlation here? And I just think that that's the conversation we have to have. We have to protect our public schools because I don't want to have to create another entire school system when we can just invest in the system that is here and make it better.
Yes, before we, please. Before we continue, just want to reiterate, we are in a community space. Let's be respectful to every one of our community members who are in the room. And in as much as I desperately want you a part of today's conversation, your involvement, your participation is happening through the postcards, the shout outs, the call outs. We just cannot have that. We're looking to have a fruitful conversation.
Amen, brother.
Yeah, I don't want to get on the soapbox, but I am at a podium, so I'll just continue. We know the political climate that we exist in, and I am immensely, eternally grateful that both of our candidates decided to show up here today. Like, I would imagine, I would tell you I had a little bit of trepidation when I made the invitation because I just didn't know if I would get a response, let alone them to show up today, and they did that. So let's honor and respect both of their commitment to today's event. Let's honor and respect one another in this room. Let's have a fruitful conversation because ultimately we know we want the same thing. The question is, how do we get there? And the journey does not need to include a shouting match when trying to scream out directions. So please, thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to follow up on this topic. And again, we'll start with Dan on this one, Mr. Butierez, excuse me. Do you believe Congress has a role in ensuring states like Arizona remain accountable for equitable use of public education dollars? If so, what federal oversight or reform would you support to protect students in districts like Tucson Unified and Santa Cruz Valley from funding gaps and policy instability?
Okay, well, I believe the federal government is responsible to protect all its citizens. As far as which government I would trust to watch it and oversee it, I haven't had a lot of luck in trusting any government, but we definitely need to have the money overseen, make sure it's going in the right places. And I did want to respond to one thing on the last one. On the education, we're like our public schools are like 47th in the nation, 50th, it keeps changing. And our charter schools are #1. So I can understand why parents want to take their kids from public school to charter schools.
Supervisor Grijalva, you need me to repeat the question, you know?
Yeah, I think the voucher programs are stealing precious resources from our children. They're causing overcrowded classrooms, reducing desperately needed funding, and to increase teacher salaries and destroying needed investments in our infrastructure. I was on the TUSD board for 20 years. And when I started on the board, the capital funding that we received as a school district, entire district, was $160 million. That's to repair infrastructure, HVAC, that kind of thing. When I left the board, and this is direct state funding, this has nothing to do with what we have discretion at the board level, we were down to $4 million a year. Our schools are not getting newer as we progress, you know, we have some of the oldest schools in the system. And so I think the way we have to do is we have to protect the Department of Education, to provide accountability, transparency, and resources for all of our schools, introduce legislation that increases resources to English language learners, dual language and immersion programs, co-sponsor Protecting Sensitive Locations Act to protect migrant children and keep ICE out of our schools, stop the privatization of our American public school system by supporting resources for Title I schools to reduce class sizes and hire and retain more quality teachers, and support robust federal funding for the arts and libraries as a powerful rejection of Trump's agenda of cultural erasure and division.
Thank you much. We'll continue or transition to the next topic, and that is going to be housing affordability and federal support. And please continue to share the questions on any of the topics that we already covered and or other ones that we have not. Arizona experiencing one of the worst affordable housing shortages in the nation, with CD7 communities seeing rising rents, record evictions, and long wait lists for assistance. What federal solutions would you support to increase affordable housing supply and help families stay housed? And we'll start with Supervisor Grijalva.
So that was one of the priorities that we saw when I went to Pima County and became a supervisor. We created a strategic planning process, and part of that was, an overwhelming need for housing. And so what we did in Pima County is we dedicated $5 million a year from our funding. We didn't increase taxes, it wasn't state funding, we used the funding that was allocated to Pima County. And for the first year, they did the study, which was mentioned earlier, and sort of tried to figure out how we were going to distribute these funds. And what we figured out is it's gap funding that was needed. So let's say, for example, there is a project and there's federal funding for the project. There's usually like $1 million or $2 million that is a gap. So what we decided is this funding, which is only $5 million, was going to be to that gap funding. As a result of our thus far $11 million investment in housing, we've seen $422 million of public-private partnerships come forward to increase the housing affordability and increase affordable housing in our community. And that was something that we did here at the local level. So if we had programs like that at the federal level that would continue to support that, what we're going to see here in Pima County is we have about a 55,000 home shortage. And so 3 out of 4 families at the lower income levels spend most of their money on rent. So if there's a way for us to stabilize that, and a stable home is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And so more and more, we need to make sure that our families are housed, protected, because families who are struggling financially, we have a lot of other issues that trickle in, and we see it in our school systems and we see it in our workplaces. And so I think it's important that we expand the Housing Choice Voucher Program, increase HUD funding, and support first-time home buyers with specific ways in order to get them into homes. Thanks.
We definitely need to expand the HUD, get more money, get people into housing quicker, so they're not wasting their time. And some families are living with their parents or their relatives until they get a housing. Let me tell you, during the COVID time, we had a big problem. This is what led to this big homeless crisis that we're in. I own a painting company. I own 2 of them, actually. That's why I hire all these people. And we were doing all these apartment complexes, upgrades. Companies came out of California. They bought up these apartment complexes all over. They called my company up and hired us to go in and upgrade these apartments. So we started upgrading these apartments. Well, during the coronavirus, because I was in essential business, my people got to work. So they worked all through this and we were working. So when they lifted all that, and everybody that was they were getting almost $800 a week. I had people quit my company to go collect $800 a week so they didn't have to work. And there were a lot of people that didn't have a job, never had a job, were getting $800 a week. So everybody was getting all this money. And they didn't pay their rent. So when they ended it, all these people, and I watched them get evicted because I was doing all these apartment complexes, and I watched this homeless crisis go through the roof. People hooked on drugs. They wound up doing drugs because they were going through depression. And now we have, the last I knew, 900 homeless camps in our city. We need to get them off the streets. We need to do something for them. So I am all about, let's come together. Let's get some funds in here from the federal government and let's fix this crisis because businesses are closing their doors. Walgreens are shutting down. A lot of people, low-income people, can't go anywhere. They've got to walk to the Walgreens. So as you can tell, my passion is the homeless. So thank you.
Thank you both. We will move to, let's go to water rights and drought resilience. I think something we all can easily agree on before we get to some of the more interesting topics. Arizona is at the center of a growing water crisis with shrinking Colorado River allocations and an overdrawn groundwater threatening agriculture, rural community. Overdrawn groundwater threatening agriculture, rural communities, and tribal nations. What is your plan to ensure long-term water security and fair water access for all communities in Congressional District 7? And I believe we'll start with Mr. Butierez this time.
Well, we need to desalinate more water, recycling it. I was at the Blue Project. Boy, that got a little heated there. I don't know if any of you were there, but I was sitting down there and trying to hear what they were talking about because I was really interested because water is very important. It's a very important resource here in Arizona. Our groundwater is being taken away. We need to figure out a different way. When I was a kid in high school, they talked about, you can get an iceberg down here and it put Texas under 2 feet of water. Of course, an iceberg's a little too far to move. But we have technology today. We can drill for oil, pipe it, distribute it all around the world, and we can't get some water from Alaska here. We need to start refilling our underground waters, which they are tapping and they're draining. Water is we need to start desalinating more water. They're using it over on golf courses. That's what they use at golf courses. That's what they use at the prisons. That's what they use in many communities. We need to use it more farms, mining, other areas. We need to save our underground water for us. Thank you.
I strongly support the Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan. I think Arizona must receive their fair share of water. I think every basin state must contribute to sustainable long-term solution. Cities like Tucson are doing their part to reduce their water consumption. Pima County is working on waste. We have wastewater plants all over trying to make sure that we reuse that one drop of water as often as we can. Farmers in California need to do their part. I met with farmers in Yuma, and they are really utilizing water in a very unique way to really conserve their water. And I feel like California has not really, the farmers there are not doing their part there. State level policies and investments must promote equitable solutions to our water communities. And we must also address the limitations of our existing water allocations. I think that that's really important because when you go to California, you go into a hotel, let's say, they'll tell you, please reuse everything more than once. And then we cross the state line and conceivably there doesn't seem to be a crisis and we're all connected together. So we need stronger water conservation efforts and federal investments to repair aging water delivery systems. We also have to acknowledge PFAS contamination in our water supplies. Every Arizonan deserves access to clean, safe, high quality drinking water. And we have several Superfund sites in our communities right now. We were raised right next to one. And I think that is critically important because what that does is when we're getting poisoned without knowing, That creates cancer clusters all over our communities. And guess which communities are most negatively impacted by poison water and land and air? Communities of color. So support tribal, and we have to support tribal nations and their long-standing water rights claims. I support the Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Act and honor the obligations to those communities.
Well, I think we have time for two more questions coming, two more prepared questions, and then we'll get to the question that you submitted. Just to give you all a sense of where we are on time and the rest of the program. For this, we'll transition to foreign policy and U.S. involvement abroad. As the U.S. continues to provide military and humanitarian aid in conflicts overseas, including Ukraine, Israel, and Gaza, and other global regions, how do you determine when American involvement is justified, and what limits, if any, would you support on foreign aid or military engagement? We'll start with Supervisor Grijalva.
Thank you. You know what's funny is this question never came up on any of our forums, like at all, which I thought was very odd. But anyway, but thank you for asking the question. So our foreign policy should reflect our deepest values: democracy, human rights, and international cooperation. We must stop endless wars, reinvest in alliances that promote peace and democracy, and prioritize diplomacy over military intervention. Our policy approach with regard to current conflicts must be rooted in diplomacy. We need to work through international bodies and regional partners to bring an end to the violence in the Middle East and the war in Ukraine. A just, lasting peace for Israelis and Palestinians depends on immediate release of the remaining hostages and humanitarian aid, rapid and complete restoration into the Gaza Strip, and setting the foundation for a two-state solution that recognizes equal rights for Israelis and Palestinians to lead peacefully and with opportunity. In addition, dismantling our foreign program, Trump is now working to get the State Department cut them by 50%. This is the exact opposite of what we need to do. Foreign aid and diplomacy should always be used before military intervention, which endangers service members and costs trillions. Addressing global drivers of conflict like climate change and poverty must be front and center as well.
I believe we need to quit funding all these wars. If it wasn't for us funding them, we wouldn't have been in this spot in the first place. We got a Gaza attacking Israel, and naturally we had to get involved with it because Israel is our ally. It has always been our ally. But I am sick and tired of us getting in wars where our children are killing each other. Men are fighting in wars they don't want to fight because politicians can be rich. I have a daughter that's in the United States Air Force, so this reaches deep into my heart. She's been in Afghanistan several times, several tours in Afghanistan, a war that we should have never been in the first place. So I believe that we shouldn't be getting into any wars unless, of course, they're invading our allies or they're invading our country. Most of these wars are over minerals and profit. And it has been that way for a long, long time. So I'm very against war. I believe in peace. I'm a man who just, I value life. That's the way I was taught. I'm raised a Catholic my whole life, and I believe in the sanctity of life, and I can't see these things continuing over oil and money and material things. So, thank you.
Next, the topic will be immigration and border security, and I understand this is going to be a more interesting topic. I just want to remind you all to be respectful in this subject matter. We are in a community space, so let's be respectful of our community members. Arizona shares 370 miles of border with Mexico, and CD7 includes communities deeply impacted by both federal enforcement and humanitarian migration. How would you balance border security with the need to protect human rights, ensure economic stability, and support communities like Nogales and South Tucson that are on the front lines of these issues, and the meetings with Yuma there as well. Mr. Butierez?
I've been up and down the border for the last 2 years. I've been from Yuma to Douglas. The worst spot in our border is Sassby. And about 14 miles down up Sassby, from the Sassby Port of Entry, the wall stops. And there were hundreds of people were coming through just prior to Trump getting in. There were hundreds literally coming from the end of the wall. Our border patrol were driving back and forth, picking them up, transporting them over into Tucson where we were housing them and taking care of them. We want to talk humanitarian crisis. At that time, I was really upset because I was following the money that we were spending on these migrants. And again, I'm about the homeless, so there was this one time where they sent $400,000 aside to help our homeless, our community, and $20 million to incentivize more homeless coming from all around the world. And I'm not talking our neighbors right next door. These are people coming from all kinds of different countries into our state. And they're coming in with their own beliefs, their own practices, and it's not the way our country is set up. It's not the way that we bring immigrants into our country. We bring them in where they follow our laws, they understand the laws. We have migrants coming in here that have their own laws from whatever country they came from, and it's caused a bit of a mess here in our community. It's not like when our neighbors next door were coming here. They're coming from everywhere. And now our homeless are being ignored while they're taking care of all these other ones. And that's a humanitarian crisis right here. I'm an American First candidate. That's what I believe in. I believe in American First. Thank you.
So we all want safe communities, right? South Tucson is not a border community though. Is San Luis maybe, or Douglas? And it said South Tucson. I was like, I don't know. But anyway, I think that when we're talking about the resources for asylum seekers, people that were seeking asylum, those are federal dollars that came to Pima County. I know that because I was on the board when we set up that system. And what the goal was is to make sure that our communities were safe and that we didn't have Border Patrol, which was the threat that they would pass 2 other counties and drop people off in the middle of Tucson. So I just want to be clear about that there were no local resources that were deviated from any other programs in order to support that program. But I think that we have to be real here. Terrorizing families and ripping babies away from moms while they're in the hospital, creating violent chaos raids is wrong. Trump and Republicans said they were going to go after the worst of the worst, that they were going to go after people who were criminals, right? I remember that. And I don't think that we had a lot of disagreement on that. The problem is right now, we all see that that's not what's happening. What's happening is that Black and brown people are being targeted because of the color of their skin. They're being looked at and saying, do you have your papers? Literally next to me, that happened in a restaurant. So this is not me sort of trying to glamorize or be dramatic about what's happening in our communities. That's literally what is happening. Deporting hardworking friends and neighbors without a due process. It isn't just morally wrong, it's economically stupid. Our economy, especially in Arizona, depends on hardworking immigrants, as does the whole nation. We are a nation made up of immigrants, period. Unless you are indigenous to this land, we all got here one way or another. So I just think that that's important. And these mass deportation policies are hurting our elder care, are hurting child care, small businesses. We're already seeing staff shortages in care sectors. Like this is what's happening in our communities. And when we're talking about the need for affordable housing, how many of the construction workers are immigrants from Mexico? A lot of them, which is why those projects aren't getting done right now. So according to the Congressional Budget Office, immigrants will boost overall economy growth by $7 trillion by expanding labor force and increasing consumer spending. And I think that when my tata got here, there was a program, a bracero program. I think that we have to make sure that we provide that same opportunity to people who are coming into this country, want a better life. Let's give them an actual process by which to become a citizen. Because we have people that have been in this country, that have raised their children, that have been married to a US citizen for over 20 years and still do not have the opportunity to become a citizen. Well, when we talk about people doing it the right way, let's provide the right way. Right now, the processes that most of us our families got here with do not exist anymore. And so I think that that's really important, because this administration is okay with immigrants coming in as long as you can pay for that golden card, right? You can do that, and that's okay. Has nothing to do with the value that you're going to bring to this country. And I think that we have to protect our DACA recipients, our dreamers. We have to make sure that there is a pathway here, because right now they're talking about people who are naturalized citizens being threatened. And this administration increased the budget for ICE not 2 times, 20 times. 20 times. And what that means, sadly, for those of you that are cheering, is that medical providers and professionals will not have the supports, because people who are coming to this country are not just here on working in agriculture and working in construction. They work in medical, they work in elder care facilities. So for our aging community, which the nation is aging, those are the people that are taking care of us. They're not going to be here.
All right, there were a couple things said that I want to correct. One, Trump did come out and said he wasn't going to deport those that are working in the fields of construction. Here's the thing, there's no one working in the fields over there in Yuma that are illegal, are there, Michelle? Yeah, no. There aren't, and if there's construction workers that are here illegal, then you need to arrest the employer. Okay, because they're not supposed to be, the employer's not supposed to hire them. Every one of my employees, I have to e-verify, it's Arizona law. So there's a problem right there. If the employers are hiring them and there's illegals that aren't working, or that are working for them, then the employer needs to be fined. So that's where that is. Thanks.
So I was in Yuma about a month ago. There are people that when ICE came into the field, they started running. So why would they run? Yeah, so I think the reality is that we also have people that come to our country with an H-2A visa. It is a work permit visa. They come and work here and then want to go back home at night and then come back to work. Right now, our ports of entry are so clogged that they can't go back and forth. So I think that we also, when we're looking, we can't talk about border security in isolation, because what we need is a functioning immigration system. Comprehensive immigration reform is critical. There is no orderly process right now to get in, and we're never going to fix the problem no matter how much we militarize our borders and attack our immigrant communities. We're never going to do that without a comprehensive immigration reform happening.
There is a movement to be clear, there are a couple of questions that are similar in scope. I'm going to just combine them a bit. So if you hear questions that sound similar to yours, I'm not reading this verbatim. But there's a movement to demonize diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to pretend there are no health disparities based on race and ethnicity. Most recently, there's a headline that was shared that Black women are the fastest growing separations from the workforce. So what are your thoughts on the attack on DEI and the impact it's had on Black and African American communities? Start with Supervisor Grijalva.
I think it was a really sad time when I saw that diversity, equity, and being inclusive were bad words. I just don't think it is. I think that our communities are stronger because we are different, and we try to work together to come up with solutions. And not only African American women and women of color, Latinas, are also #1 for fatalities when we're giving birth. And I think that is a reality that we have to acknowledge. And we are overlooked often. We're overlooked in the workplace, we're overlooked when we have health concerns, and when we had COVID, what we did is we went out and looked at where are the areas of town that had a disproportionate number of people that were not accessing either our vaccines or our medical services that were out in the community during COVID. Guess what communities were highlighted? Those that live in poverty and those that are of color. And so those disparities exist, which is why the Pima County Health Department and other health departments that did the same, utilized that same sort of mapping, are focusing their services in these communities to make sure that we prevent some of these. Because the saddest thing to me is when you have communities that have cancer clusters because of poisoning, and then we don't provide early intervention to try to catch that before it gets worse. We also have communities that have a disproportionate number of people living with diabetes, living with other preventable health concerns, and we have to be more aggressive when it comes to making policy decisions based on who has the greatest need. And that is our communities of color and especially our women of color. We need more services and support, more advocacy, more prevention. We need those services more than anybody else. And I think that we have to look at distributing federal resources to the communities that need it the most.
Well, when you're dealing with DEI, it can get pretty upset with everybody. Everyone's got a different opinion on that. But I can tell you this, if I got a doctor working on me, I want it to be the best doctor, not someone that was just hired because but that being said, I do agree that people need to, we need to help others that are being looked at different. I grew up I was born here in '66, and I grew up in a time when Hispanics were looked at different than everybody else. I grew up as an Irish Hispanic male. I've seen racism all while I grew up, so I understand what this DEI is about, and I understand that we need to address it. But I believe I believe we make it worse when we make it all about DEI. So, anyways, that's all I gotta say. Thanks. Bye.
I think one of my instant frustration with what was just said is the assumption that if it is a person of color that is your doctor, that the only reason they got there is because of DEI. That's not okay. That's not okay. Because what we have to remember here is that it's not an equal distribution of resources, it's equitable distribution of resources. And when you have people that are, let's say hypothetically, let's put Scottsdale and South Tucson together, right? In communities like Scottsdale, you might have people that have more discretionary money. They might have higher education attained. And maybe in South Tucson, that's not the case because working families and working people find it very difficult sometimes to go ahead and go to school while you're also raising a family and working 2 jobs. So to make sure that we have equitable distribution of resources is why I think it's important for us to keep the door open for people of color. When we have reached some sort of attainment, we put our hand down and pull people up with us. This administration thinks that anyone that doesn't look like them is a DEI hire, and that's not okay. That's also not true.
I think this may have to be our last question, then I'll give the candidates opportunity to have some closing message. But following the civil rights movement, there have been a number of programs that were initiated both statewide and federally to empower minority communities. Unfortunately, there are many Black and African American communities that have felt to be overlooked in these outreach of this initiation of programs and initiatives. What message would you have for Black and African American Arizonans who feel left out by the advancements of, or the initiation of programs and resources that were intended to benefit them? Dan, excuse me, Ms. Butierez.
Well, for starters, I would have an open door policy so that everyone can come and address the issues and bring these things to my attention. Because if we're not out representing the community, we can't fix anything. We're not listening to the community, we can't fix anything. And for far too long, we have not been, we haven't had too much representation here in Arizona. And as a matter of fact, I'm willing to represent everybody. I know there are some individuals that are running that here in our district and in our city limits that only represent half of their community. The other half they silence, the other half they attack. So we need representation that's willing to listen to everybody, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, and hear them out, because we can't do anything as a representative if we're not going to listen to our constituents. Thank you.
So I will say that I think it is interesting that, you know, when you say, I guess I'll ask, would you have voted for that bill, Trump's bill, if you were in office? Out of curiosity. I'm just asking, maybe you'll ask that. You can ask that later, maybe. The reason why I ask is because when we're talking about programs that are gonna negatively impact Arizonans, that bill included so many, from our veteran communities, to our children, to our families. That bill is going to devastate so many communities and so many people in our communities. And the reason why I'll say this is because it's not just like it hits you one time. It hits you more than once. When your taxes, you're not really gonna get any sort of benefit from taxes for the most part. And let's say you get a couple $100. Let's just say that for hypotheticals. When you go to the doctor, your plans are not gonna cover as much. Your prescription costs are gonna be more. And oh, by the way, the price of eggs are still going up. So we had a lot of promises made to our communities that we were going to see some sort of relief. We have not seen it. And so you're not gonna have to come to me to talk to me about what those impacts are. I live here, my kids are here. I know what those impacts are, and we are always gonna continue to have a dialogue, because regardless of what office I've been in, I have met with community groups throughout the 22 years that I've been in elected office. And by the way, my dad represented this community for 22 years. And I think he did an amazing job at being an advocate and speaking up for Southern Arizona, and I would be proud to stand on his shoulders and represent this community in the same way.
I'm going to ask one follow-up question to that before we give the candidates a closing opportunity to close out. But it is a follow-up to the previous question, and going back to a question that was asked earlier. But for both candidates, whether it's justifying American dollars being spent on those who are just entering our country, or being funded to international wars and other programs, how do you justify spending American tax dollars in that way when there are community members there are American citizens living in depressed communities not being served with our tax dollars that they contribute to? Start with Supervisor Grijalva.
So what I think is really interesting is when we start to pick apart every program. It's like, well, why is the federal government paying for this, and why aren't they paying for that? I think one of the things that is so critical of our federal system in funding local solutions. So I don't think it should be an across the board on how any community addresses any issue. I think that you have to look at what your resources are when you're there. Some communities have a more robust nonprofit organization, let's say. Some communities have more supports in the city and the county than others do. And I think that it's important to do that. When we look at what should be funded, which I think more support services should be funded, what was passed in that bill is the largest redistribution of wealth in this nation's history. And people who make more in the 1% are gonna get more. And those of us that are the rest of the 99% are not. And so when we look at those kinds of programs, I would support more expansion of funding of federal programs for local solutions that support substance abuse prevention, education, protecting our environment, community cleanup of these Superfund sites, and trying to provide more healthcare support for those that are struggling, our veterans, our children. And when we look at those programs and those solutions, I think we should fund more at the federal level. But right now, the programs that are currently funding those initiatives are being cut.
All right, well, on that big beautiful bill that I was asked by Adelita about, I haven't seen the whole bill, I haven't gone over the whole bill, but I do know one part of the bill that would have impacted me personally, and many others of you out there, that they keep referring to, that this bill made the rich richer and the average person like all of us poorer. But let me tell you, in 2017, that tax cut is why I started my business. Okay, that tax cut was going to go away. And I'm not one of the millionaires and billionaires. I'm telling you that right now. I'm not one of those rich. And that big, beautiful bill helped me and thousands of other small business owners just like me that aren't millionaires and billionaires. So when they say that it helped the billionaires, they're not being honest to you. Okay, that's a fact. And many of those businesses, like myself, had the taxes gone up, I would have had to let a lot of people go, as would other small businesses. And that's just a fact. It's not, you know, make believe. It would have went up. And I would have had to lay people off because I would have had to restructure my businesses, other thousands of small businesses. So a lot of people would have been out of jobs. As far as the border, we used to have to sponsor people coming over here. I sponsored an individual to come over here from Mexico. They're required to have a job, required to take care of themselves. This amnesty, where they're bringing people from all over the world, we sponsor it with our tax dollars. And we just take care of them, and that's not acceptable. I don't agree with any of that. So thank you.
I will say, this is a statistic that I think is important. So that bill is going to give the richest 1% of Arizonans earning more than $787,700 a year an annual tax cut of $83,800. In contrast, the lowest income Arizonans earning less than $24,500 would receive only $50. Those are facts. And the other is when you're talking about necessary tax credits that have expired that we could have implemented again, the child tax credit, which benefited 92% of Arizona families, and earned income tax credit, both of those were eliminated. And so I think that when we end what we just extended with the 2017 Trump tax cuts, it's really making people making more than $400,000 are going to benefit more than the rest of us. And I think the way we should do this is the wealthiest pay a more fair share of our taxes, including taxing wealth like labor and implementing a wealth tax for billionaires.
We'll move to conclude today's program, and I would like to invite Mr. Butierez to initiate closing thoughts.
Well, I thank you all for having me here. And Mrs. Adelita or Mrs. Grijalva for showing up. This is it's been a pleasure meeting you all. It's been a pleasure sharing with you all. If anyone has any questions, you're more than welcome to ask me. You can follow me on Facebook, and you can also read my website, and you'll find out there's a lot about me that you might find interesting. Thanks.
I want to thank you for joining us for this really important conversation about the future of Southern Arizona and our nation. If elected, I would be the first Latina from Arizona to serve in Congress, and it would be an incredible honor. But more than that, it would be a powerful reflection of the communities that have been unrepresented in our state and our country. I was born and raised here in Tucson, and I know what it means for young people, especially young girls, to see a woman of color, someone who looks like them, who shares their roots and their struggles in a position of leadership. Very clearly, my style of leadership is a servant leader. I'm not the one that's going to be running out there saying, this is my idea. It is collectively what I'm going to ask of all of you to join me in a partnership. This isn't just about making history, it's about making change. It's bringing the lived experiences of working families, border communities, and communities of color to the policy-making table, and it's about ensuring that values, voices, and the needs of Arizona and Arizona's diverse population are not only heard, but prioritized. I carry with me the hopes of generations who have fought for a seat at the table, and I'm ready to get to work to deliver real results for the people of this district and beyond. One of the most impactful pieces of advice I received as a young person was from my dad, who told me, never forget who you're fighting for. That has guided every step I've taken in public service, whether I was advocating for students at the school board level or pushing for early childhood education at the county level. I've always centered the voices of those who are too often left out of the conversation: families, educators, workers, and young people. The most important job of our next representatives is to bring the voices of Southern Arizona to Congress. That is our voice, our collective voice. That is bigger than any one person. And it is an unapologetically progressive voice that will stand up and fight back against this administration. It would be an honor and a privilege to represent this community, the community of all of us in Congressional District 7. I've called this place home my entire life, and I would be honored and humbled for you to join me, not only to vote for me, but to join me in a partnership where we lead this community together. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you to our candidates, Supervisor Adelita Grijalva, and Mr. Dan Butierez, for joining us this afternoon on this very important topic. Election day is going September 23rd. Hopefully this conversation has provided you with some information, if not enough information, on how you would like to engage in the voting booth come September 23rd. Before we head out, I just want to, if you haven't already, invite you to engage with Mr. Ken Owens with the Governor's Office of Resiliency, back in the corner. He has valuable information and resources on different programs that they have, including the HAIR program, and how you can contribute to your energy savings. So we'll allow you to speak to him to give you all the details and insight. And again, if you have not already connected with the Arizona Commission of African American Affairs, going forward, known as the Governor's Office of African American Affairs, immediately I encourage you to reach out to us at Arizona CAAA across all social media platforms. Our website is azcaaaa.az.gov. We look forward to connecting with you. And I definitely want to hear feedback on today's program. Comments, questions, criticisms, I accept them all. So look forward to hearing from you and engaging with us going forward. Thank you. Thank you. Without further
I will say
And any of the panelists that participated earlier today, if they're still with us, please join us on stage for a photo. Any panelists, please join us for a photo.
yes. Yeah, mommy said he's oh, he's gonna be all right, but I still take care of him. need to come visit church. Pastor still ministering? Still there every now and then. I love Tara. I gotta get a hold of Tara. Okay, I'm gonna find out where she's speaking again. Miss. Okay, I'll figure it out. Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, we'll put it to you. Right now. Right now. This first. This first. That's first. Ready for next one? I got the dress. Well, I got been to it.
You can walk to it now.
I can't walk. I can't walk.
I'm gonna go check him out for a minute. Go home and say that.
Did something north side of town.
Somebody finally got something up north.
Did he? Go home.
See, I should have went the opposite. Now I gotta go back up here and go back to east. Man. I know. 40 years strong, so I know.
Eat, eat, skirt, eat, skirt, skirt, eat, roll up, eat, grab that, eat. Well, this is live. It's your boy, McCray. Hey, Miss Jiggy.
All right.
Stack them like that. We'll be setting up with 3 on 2.
Yes, we were. This is my first time ever being here, low key. So it's very fun and inspirational. So yeah, see you guys.
All right, I'll see y'all soon. See y'all there.
All right, Dr. Strozier.
Okay, I'll see you tomorrow.
All right.
All right, bye.
All right. Check it out.
That's a nice cover.
Didn't know it came out right. Of course, you know I was intuitive. You can't use IMA for showing the logo if it's not an IMA. We got a couple more albums for those 22 by 4. All of these things, you know the deal. Oh, that
Bye.